Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to just say that the slides are actually going to be on the Club of Amsterdam site, so don't worry about sort of taking loads of notes. You can get them, I don't know, tomorrow or the day after, whenever they're put up. I'd also like to thank everybody for coming. Some of you have come a very long way tonight. Sometimes it's quite overwhelming for a speaker that, you know, people think they're worth, you know, you're worth travelling to hear. I'd also like to thank you for having this evening in English, because I can assure you that my Dutch is a lot worse than your English. So there we are. That's me. I'm actually a man with more than one job, so this is the job that I've put on that slide. It is quite literally what it says on the tin. I'm a futurist. I'm the head of a futures research organisation, which means that you know, I get to deal with lots of futurists, which is, like, you know, it's got to be one of the coolest jobs in the universe. So here I am. I said to my wife, I've been invited by the Club of Amsterdam to talk. You know, I think that's really great. She said, well, what are you going to talk about? And I said, future of Europe. And she said, oh, okay. How long have you got? I said, oh, 15 minutes. She said, 15 minutes? You can talk for weeks on that. And I said, yeah, I know. It's more a question of what I'm not going to say than what I am going to say. So what I thought that I would say is that we'd have an idea, a model, an application, and then a vision coming out of that application. For those of you who aren't futurists, this is actually hardcore futuring. So when people say to you, what do futurists do? Okay, the glib answer is, well, we think an awful lot about the future, but actually what we do is we take ideas, you know, hypotheses about where we are now, we hammer them into a model, we then sort of put a data population into that model, and then we roll it into the future to see what will happen next. And that's really what we're all about. So that's what I'm planning to whiz through this evening. And I'll go on to the next slide. What's the idea about Europe? Well, the idea is that originally, when it first started, sort of like 50 or 60 years ago, there was one choice. You're either in or you're out, okay? You're either part of the club or you weren't part of the club. Well, over time, that's kind of eroded. In the 1990s, we had a lot of opt-outs from sort of various aspects of Europe. Most famously for somebody from the UK is that, you know, we had an opt-out from the social chapter from Maastricht. And all of a sudden it was no longer you're in or out, because, you know, you can be in, but not fully in. And so that's really where the idea of a hard membership and soft membership comes from. There's the whole idea of the opt-out. And that's the core idea that I want to put on the table tonight. Very simple idea. It's a very useful idea because we can use that idea to compare the European model with other sort of jurisdictions around the world. We can say, would that be useful in the context of the United States? Would that be useful in the context of China? And hopefully, when we come to talk about the applications, then that will be a little bit more evident. I just want to highlight the model because, hey, I'm a futurist. Everything is a 2x2 matrix. That's what, you know, that's par for the course. So we've got the sort of like the ins and the outs and the hard members and the soft members, and you can kind of see that, you know, there's sort of differing membership levels almost within the EU. On this side, particularly on the soft outs, we'd have the aspirants, people, you know, sort of nations that would like to become members of the EU, but aren't quite ready yet to join. In the top one, the hard outs, we have sort of nations who could quite easily become members of the EU, but have chosen not to become members of the EU. We've got the European core, which is sort of the hard ins, And we've also got the soft-ins, which are sort of like those nations that are a little bit ambiguous about membership of the EU, haven't quite fully signed up to it. And sort of increasingly the United Kingdom is there. The United Kingdom could be quite interesting, an interesting case during this decade. We've been promised, if the present government is returned in 2015, that we will have a referendum on membership in 2017. And so the whole process of a nation leaving the EU actually, comes right to the fore. Personally, I don't think it'll happen, and maybe in the question session we can talk about that if you want to. But it's interesting to start thinking along those lines. So when I was sort of thinking, what can we do for an application? There are all sorts of things. We could do Schengen, we could do the movement of capital, but because I've sort of like got an economics background, a monetary background, I thought we'd talk about the euro. Okay, so lots of flags there because, I like pictures. We've got the sort of the hardcore nations in the euro. We've got sort of like Germany, Holland, Finland, Austria. These are nations that have, very little difficulty in meeting the criteria for being members of the euro. We've then got the soft-ins, okay, and that's, typically Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. Nations who are struggling to meet the criteria of membership within the euro. Equally, we have a whole raft of nations on the outside. We have Sweden and Denmark. I mean, those two nations could quite easily become members of the euro. They choose not to. We also have Norway and Switzerland, once again, two nations that could quite easily become members of the euro, but they choose not to. They much prefer their destiny outside the EU. On the soft outs, who have we got? Romania and Bulgaria, they are members of the EU, but they haven't quite achieved the sort of threshold in their economic performance that would allow them to be fully functioning members of the euro. And I've also included Turkey and Croatia, and Ali might actually disagree with me a little bit later on, but I'm coming from a world where Turkey aspires to become a member of the euro. The truth of that, I don't know, we'll hear later. But also Croatia, a nation that's joining the EU in July, 1st of July. They definitely want to be part of the euro, but their membership keeps being put back because the economic conditions within Croatia aren't quite ready for them to join. We're kind of now reaching the point where you're sort of saying to yourselves, so what? Okay, and so what's a really good question. Well, at the moment, policy within the Eurozone is sort of dedicated to pushing everybody into becoming a hard-in, irrespective of the conditions within their nation. Greece and Spain and Portugal, they feel that they're sort of suffering a huge amount of austerity in order to fit the membership of the euro. And that's really sort of, in my opinion, that's a policy that isn't sustainable. It might work for a year or 2 years or 3 years, but I'm a futurist. I'm thinking in terms of decades. Is this a long-term, stable position? I don't think so. And so really the sort of thinking that comes out of this application is to say, okay, suppose that the policy of continuing to try and make one size fit all, supposing that continues, how does the future unfold? This is really where we come on to the kind of visioning element. Okay, when futurists use the word vision, usually we call it scenarios. Okay, what is a scenario? A scenario is a vision of the future, a way in which we think the future might unfold and develop. So in our thinking about the future of the euro, particularly if we maintain the current trajectory within the eurozone, we think that there are four options that are worthy of further consideration. The first one is a Euro 2, which is where we take the existing configuration and it's made to work. Now, you know, there are one or two very nasty points in there which haven't really seen the light of day yet, which is that at the moment there isn't really a common inflation policy. Everybody's going along with the inflation targeting of the ECB, but the sort of the rate at which interest rates are set is determined by, you know, it's determined by a college of votes, and Germany only has one vote in that college. There may well come a future which we can see in Euro 2, where the sort of like, you know, the soft ins say, well, actually, we would be quite happy to accept a little bit more inflation than Germany, and we're going to vote for that. So Euro 2 has, you know, one or two very interesting consequences that interesting consequences that need to be played out. It also kind of assumes that there will be a transfer mechanism within the euro. Once again, that's highly contentious. It's an issue that people have avoided so far. Second possibility is a northern euro. That's something that's received a huge amount of attention and a huge amount of press. The whole idea of the Grexit or Cyprus leaving the euro, that sort of thing. And if the periphery leaves, then it will be the core countries, the hard-ins, that will be left in that particular vision. But there is a flip side to that coin. And last year, I did a fact find of Portugal, and I was asked to talk to a group of Portuguese bankers. And they were all saying, oh, we're going to get pushed out of the euro, oh, we're going to get forced out of the euro. And I said, why do you think that might happen? There's equally a case for you to push the Germans out, okay? I mean, in a balance, it's a two-way street, okay? You can argue it one way or another. And there is a case developing. I mean, there's sort of like a political movement now in Germany. We're starting to see it in the German elections for September, where, you know, there's a kind of withdrawal from Europe amongst part of the German population. And it's sort of come onto the agenda there that Germany might actually, you know, there is a future in which Germany might want to leave the euro. Which, you know, again, you know, as a futurist, I find that very interesting. That's certainly one for us to play with. Then, of course, there's sort of no euro at all, which is the complete collapse of the currency. And that's a future which sort of, it's reasonably undesirable, but because it's a possibility, it's certainly one that, you know, in our visioning, we might want to play with. So we're coming on to the last slide. Yay, I've got 5 minutes left. So, because you can still apply the test, so what, okay? Right, just suppose that some of our visions come about. What can we do about it? These are macro futures in that there are, you know, big events that are happening all over the place that you can do nothing to influence. There's nothing that I, as an individual, can do to influence whether or not the euro breaks up. However, in terms of micro futures, I can work out what's my position going to be, and I was told we have a number of corporate people in the audience. You might say to yourself, what is the position of our company going to be in that eventuality? So this is very much a kind of, you know, a forewarning, preparing exercise. There are 3 levels, okay, that I want to talk about tonight, and, you know, my fellow members of the World Future Society might say, Stephen, you know, this is Janet and John. And so, yeah, I know, okay, but, you know, 3 levels, okay? One is that we talk in terms of developing the visions. We start to give a little bit of body to the scenarios to see what they look like, who the key players are, what the main issues are likely to be, what the key drivers are. We start to dissect the scenarios so that we get a better understanding of what to look for in the present to see if that future is likely to unfold. The next level, the second one, is that we can game our responses. One of the things that we do quite a lot it's exclusively in London, we don't really do this anywhere else, is we run corporate war games where we say, that's the scenario, what's your company, what's your organisation going to do about it? And we sort of kind of march through a kind of anticipatory event where we sort of, we try and sort of look at some of the key decision issues so that people can kind of, almost rehearse what they're going to do. We did one in January for a group of hedge funds in London. That was very, very successful. We were modelling an Italian election that didn't go quite right, and funnily enough, when the Italian election didn't go quite right, the people who attended that particular session actually have made quite a lot of money this spring. So, that's the argument for that. The final one is that we can say all of these futures are incredibly undesirable. We do not want them to happen. So, armed with that information, we can say this is what we are going to do in the future in order to avoid an unfortunate position in. Sorry, I got that the wrong way around. We can organise ourselves in the present because we say we don't want to get that future. We can work now to avoid that future because it's so undesirable. And when we're talking in terms of the scenario where the euro collapses, I would put it to you that that's one of the things that all of you who are in the Eurozone, of course I'm from the UK so I'm outside the Eurozone, but all of you who are in the Eurozone might actually want to start thinking about doing that. So I'm being told that my time is up, and I said that I'd be spot on.
Thank you very much.